Canada's cannabis revolution. On a crisp October morning in 2018, Canadians lined up outside retail stores across the country, eager to make history. For the first time, buying cannabis was no longer a secretive transaction in a back alley or an illicit dispensary. It was completely legal. Smiling customers posed for photos with their purchases, news cameras rolled, and the world watched as Canada became the first G7 nation to legalize recreational cannabis. This was more than a policy shift. It was a cultural milestone decades in the making. Behind this groundbreaking moment lay a tangled history of prohibition, resistance, and activism. From the shadowy criminalization of cannabis in the 1920s to the rebellious rise of illegal dispensaries in the 2000s, the road to legalization was anything but smooth. Along the way, cannabis evolved from a stigmatized drug to a multi-billion-dollar industry and a celebrated part of Canadian life. This is the story of how Canada's relationship with cannabis transformed, a story of politics, pioneers, pop culture, and the unshakable will of a nation to challenge the status quo. Today, we're taking a closer look at one of the most profound policy and cultural shifts in modern Canadian history, the legalization of cannabis. To understand how far Canada has come, we need to look at where it started. Cannabis wasn't always controversial in Canada. In fact, before the early 20th century, it wasn't much talked about at all. But in 1923, cannabis was quietly added to a list of banned substances under the Opium and Narcotic Drug Act, without any public debate, scientific consultation, or major cultural concern. It wasn't a response to a national crisis or widespread use. It was preemptive, part of a wave of global prohibitionist thinking that swept across countries like the US and the UK during the same period. By the 1960s and 70s, cannabis use became more visible, particularly among young people and countercultural movements. With that came an increase in arrests. In fact, between the early 70s and the 2000s, hundreds of thousands of Canadians were charged with cannabis-related offenses, most of them for simple possession. What's important to note is that cannabis laws were never just about the plant. They were about power, class, and control. Racialized communities, Indigenous peoples, and lower-income Canadians were disproportionately targeted by cannabis enforcement. For many, a minor cannabis charge could derail employment opportunities, education, housing, for years. The law was not just outdated, it was causing real harm. Things began to shift in 2001, when Canada became one of the first countries in the world to legalize cannabis for medical use. Under Health Canada's marijuana medical access regulations, patients with qualifying conditions could apply for permission to possess and grow cannabis or purchase it from a licensed provider. This wasn't about getting high. It was about improving quality of life. People with cancer, chronic pain, epilepsy, PTSD, and other conditions found genuine relief through cannabis when other treatments failed them. It also marked the first time that the federal government acknowledged cannabis could have legitimate therapeutic value. The conversation was beginning to change, slowly but surely, and with it, a small, tightly regulated medical cannabis industry started to grow. Producers, cultivators, researchers, all of them laying the groundwork for something much bigger to come. By the mid-2010s, public opinion had shifted dramatically. Surveys showed that a majority of Canadians supported legalization. The arguments were clear. Prohibition wasn't working, enforcement was inconsistent and expensive, and legalizing cannabis would allow for regulation, taxation, and better public health education. Enter Justin Trudeau. In the 2015 federal election, Trudeau made cannabis legalization a central campaign promise.
I have said many times it is our intention to stop Mr. Harper's failed approach on marijuana. Right now, the system that Mr. Harper is defending makes it easier for young people to access marijuana than it is for them to access beer or even cigarettes. Right now, the system that approach on marijuana is actually funding criminal organizations, street gangs, and gun runners. We need to base our policies on evidence. And that means protecting our kids and removing organized crime from the equation. So the Liberal Party is committed to legalizing and regulating marijuana, controlling it in a way that is going to protect our kids and remove criminal elements from it. And we're going to get started on that right away.
And in October 2018, his government delivered. With the passing of the Cannabis Act, Canada became the second country in the world, after Uruguay, to fully legalize cannabis for recreational use at the national level. The rollout was cautious, but it was historic. Each province and territory was given the power to design its own retail and distribution system. Some, like Alberta, embraced private stores. Others, like Quebec, opted for government-run outlets. Regardless of the model, legal cannabis became a regulated part of Canadian society, complete with standardized packaging, age restrictions, and quality controls. The immediate impact? A thriving industry. By 2024, legal cannabis sales in Canada had surpassed $5 billion annually. The sector now supports tens of thousands of jobs, from cultivation to marketing, from retail to research. Entire towns have seen economic revitalization thanks to cannabis production. But it hasn't been without bumps in the road. Black market sales still exist. In some provinces, high taxes and slow licensing have made it hard for legal retailers to compete. Culturally, cannabis has undergone a remarkable transformation in Canada. It's no longer confined to stoner stereotypes. You'll find cannabis-infused teas and wellness products in upscale boutiques. Seniors are using it to manage arthritis and insomnia. Yoga studios offer CBD workshops. Universities have entire programs dedicated to cannabis business and cultivation. Even language has changed. We're talking about microdosing, terpenes, and full-spectrum extracts. The culture is becoming more informed, more nuanced, and less stigmatized. And while cannabis is now a normalized part of Canadian life, there's still caution. Health professionals continue to warn about the risks of early and excessive use, especially among youth. There are still public health concerns. Impaired driving, dependency, and long-term effects are being studied in real time. But the difference today is that the conversation is in the open. No more pretending, no more criminalizing, just data, dialogue, and better decision-making. Canada's cannabis journey has been long, complicated, and transformative. What started as a prohibition rooted in fear and misinformation has grown into a regulated, respected industry and a powerful cultural shift. And while it took nearly a century to get here, it took bold leadership from activists, patients, scientists, and yes, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to move the country forward. There's still a lot to learn and a lot to fix. But for the first time, Canada isn't hiding from the conversation, it's leading it. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more videos about Canada.